Adam, in talking about your dad, how would you describe your dad?
I would describe him as remarkable. Um, I would say he's, without a doubt, the greatest person I've ever met. Um, Kind, compassionate, understanding, supportive. Um, he's just remarkable, and I've been very fortunate to have him as my father. He's the things that he's taught me. He's always, I think, one of the great traits about him and the entire his brothers and sisters is that everyone is so supportive, um, always encouraging, um, always standing behind you, always giving you positive support. And I think my parents separated when I was a child, but that never interfered in my relationship with my father because I lived with my mother, and my brother Joe lived with my dad. And that again, that divorce never interfered in his unwavering support and love of me and his participation in my life.
You were young, so I don't know how much you remember all this, but I remember because I was staying with your father for a while when I was going to college, that to keep that family unit going, he would get on, I guess it would be the train every weekend and bring Jody and himself to come to you.
That's right. And then once I got older, we were in New York, and then we moved to New Haven. I would get on the plane almost every weekend and come up and see my dad and see Joe. So it was, my father has always been my role model and my hero. And that's, I always tell people that it's quite remarkable to have, so many people look outside the family to athletes or entertainers for their heroes and role models, and to be able to have that under your own roof is really quite amazing.
It is. You know, it's also interesting to me because you, as you mentioned, were raised by your mom, and Joe or Jody was with your dad, and yet it's interesting to me because you have your father's speech cadence, you have his mannerisms, even more so than Jody. As Jody explained, he took after the mother's side of the family more as far as temperament and so on and so forth. Have you ever noticed that you have his mannerisms and things?
Well, yes, I think that I was fortunate enough when we traveled to Africa together back in 1980. Went to about 15 different countries, and people would always tease and say, "You guys must be brothers. These guys look exactly alike." And I think I wanted to emulate my dad because of what he meant to me. So I'm not sure that I consciously did it in some respects, but I wanted to be like him. Yes, yeah.
All right. What are some of the things, Adam, that he imparted into you?
Well, I think there's a lot, but I think he really emphasized being, and it sounds corny in some way, being a good person. To be an outstanding person, to be a compassionate person, and I think with all the things that my father has accomplished, he's extremely humble, and he treats everyone. I was fortunate enough to again be with him. We were in Africa, and he's meeting with presidents of countries. To the waitress or the stewardess or anyone, he treats everyone the exact same with total respect, and he always has the time for everyone, and that really stood out to me.
By him being what I would call, like you, a great man and very accomplished, did it put pressure on you as you were growing up to be his son?
It's a good question. Um, I think there was pressure, but I think it was more pressure I probably put on myself. Um, he never he never said you must do this, you must do that, but it was because of him, because of my Uncle James and my Aunt Mary, all the other members of the family, because of what they have achieved. I didn't want to let that down, yet that foundation. those roots. I didn't want to let that down. So I think I put the pressure on myself because I wanted to, everything that they had gone through, all the things that they had given all of us, I didn't want that to go to waste. I wanted to try to participate in, and develop my own foundation based on what they had given us.
Your answer was very similar to mine because I said something much like that. I put pressure on myself because they had already left such a great legacy.
Right.
And I wanted to follow in those footsteps, and I didn't want to let the family down. Him being your father and grandfather to your children, how has he affected your children?
I think he's had a terrific effect on them because it's, children, I think sometimes have a hard time listening to their own parents. So having grandparents, they have wonderful grandparents. I think he's able to say things to them, and they can take it to heart more so than I may say something to them. And I think they relish and cherish the fact that they get a chance to spend time with him. As you know, my father has a multitude of stories, so he's a great storyteller. And I think even though sometimes he tells the stories again and again, the children love it. So I think it's been a terrific experience for them to have him. I feel very blessed that they've got a chance to know him. I didn't know I didn't know our grandfather, Papa Leon. Obviously, he died before I was born, so that's something that I regret. So I think it's been terrific for them.
That's one of the reasons that this documentary is so important to all of us, because this will preserve him and the rest of them forever. It's immortality when you're on tape like this.
That's right.
And unfortunately, as you said, we never had Granddaddy Leon. So we don't know his voice, we don't know his great laughter, and all the things that maybe we hear. And I think myself and Loudon were the only two grandchildren that really even met him.
Okay.
And my memories of him are rather blurred because I was very young when I met him, but I do have a couple of memories of him. All right, before expanding this a little more, Joe, do you have any questions that would be relevant just to your dad?
I guess at some point I want to ask you to recount some fun times with Dad, things like that. Are you going to ask him that?
Go ahead.
Be a good point for that now.
Fun times. Well, I think, as I've alluded to, we took a remarkable trip together when I was in college. We spent about 3 months in Africa, going from West Africa, Southern Africa to East Africa, and leaving Africa through Egypt. And that was really special because, again, I'd already had so much admiration for my dad, but this trip, I got to see him in action, and it was, it was thrilling to be able to go to travel all these different countries again, meeting with presidents, secretaries of states, ambassadors, and watching him going into the villages. Some of the great stories. I was telling my children the other day. In every village that we went to, it was always a big deal. The chief would greet my father, and the children would be singing, people would be playing music, and it was always a big celebration. And one of the things that happened a couple of times is in some of the villages there would be, to celebrate Dad's arrival, they would have a goat, a live goat, and they would cut its throat and put the blood in a cup, and you'd have to drink it. And Dad was like, you got to drink it, or at least pretend to drink it. And I did, and warm goat's blood was something I'll never forget. But no, I think that that trip, that experience was really quite remarkable. Going to Egypt together, riding the camels around the pyramids. It was very, very special. And So I think, you know, those are.
How old were you at that time?
I was 19.
Anything from the Riverdale days, you know, Dad coming to the games to see you play, and you know, and it wasn't that often, but just
Well, I think certainly, yeah, I mean, that was always very special. I mean, that's one of the drawbacks of obviously being in different towns. You know, I would have wished that he had come to more events, but I certainly understood. So when he did come, it was really quite wonderful. I was named MVP of captain of the track team, and he came down. It was a big awards dinner that he came down to, and that was very special. But I think, you know, the moments really I treasure the most have really been like in his kitchen, in his kitchen here in the living room, and just listening to him talk about the world and his experiences. And again, it's just always being extremely supportive.
Anything else in particular on your dad before I expand?
I don't know, just any other times, you know, for me, Dad talked about the time I dropped the tickets, you know, before we got on the boat. Just any fun things that are folk tales or just stories that you can remember besides the trip. I don't know, some taking a drive or just, I don't know, just scan through a few other memories if you can.
But
Antioch College or just.
Well, okay, I do have a funny. Yeah, there was a very